Tonight we delve into a story that proves the most impenetrable walls aren't built of stone, but of grief. We're going inside the most exclusive charity gala of the year, hosted by the enigmatic billionaire Alexander Blackwood, a man who has everything yet wants nothing. For 5 years since the tragedy that shattered his world, he has refused to dance, turning the ballroom floor into a cold memorial of what he lost. The city's most beautiful and powerful women have all tried to break his silent vow, and all have failed. But they didn't count on the one person. No one ever sees a single mother working as a waitress whose small daughter is about to do the unthinkable and ask the man who has frozen his heart for a dance. Stay with us as we unfold a story of unexpected love, vicious deception, and a secret connection that binds two worlds together in the most astonishing way. The grand ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel was a universe unto itself, a swirling galaxy of diamonds, silk, and old money. Chandeliers like frozen waterfalls of light dripped crystal brilliance onto the city's elite. The air, thick with the scent of expensive perfume and blooming peonies, hummed with a symphony of polite laughter and the clinking of champagne flutes. At the center of this universe, yet entirely separate from it, stood Alexander Blackwood. He commanded the room from a velvet-upholstered alcove, a king in a self-imposed exile. At 38, he possessed a severe classical handsomeness that was more intimidating than inviting. His tuxedo was impeccably tailored by Tom Ford, his watch a Patek Philippe, but his eyes, the color of a stormy sea, held a chilling emptiness that no amount of wealth could fill. This event, the annual Blackwood Foundation Gala for Children's Arts, was his creation, or rather, it was hers. Eleanor's. And for Alexander, every note played by the string quartet was a shard of glass in his memory. 5 years. It had been 5 years since the screech of tires on a rain-slicked road had stolen the music from his life. Eleanor, his wife, had been a dancer not professionally, but with a passion that was the vibrant core of her being. She believed that art, especially dance, could heal the world. She had founded this gala. Now it was a monument to her absence, and Alexander presided over it like a warden over a beautiful hollow prison. "Alexander, darling," a voice like poisoned honey purred beside him. He didn't need to turn to know it was Victoria Davenport. Her family owned half of the city's prime real estate, and she wore her ambition like a second skin. Her dress was a slash of crimson against the room's softer palettes, a deliberate cry for attention. "Victoria," he acknowledged, his voice a low baritone that carried no warmth. His gaze remained fixed on the dance floor, where couples twirled in a graceful, pain-inducing display. He saw ghosts there, he and Eleanor, her laughter echoing in his mind as he spun her head thrown back in pure joy. "You look tense," Victoria continued, placing a perfectly manicured hand on his arm. He stiffened at the touch. "It's a party. You should be celebrating the incredible good you do. Why don't you let me change your mind? One dance." It was the same question he'd been fending off all night, all year, for 5 years. From her, it felt particularly predatory. "You know I don't dance," he said, the words clipped and final. Victoria's smile tightened, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face before being replaced by practiced sympathy. "Of course. Forgive me. It's just so hard to see you alone." He was never alone. He was constantly suffocatingly accompanied by the ghost of his wife. He gave a curt nod, a clear dismissal, and Victoria, ever the strategist, glided away to mingle, leaving him to his brooding. Meanwhile, beyond the glittering perimeter of the main floor, in the bustling corridors leading to the kitchens, a different world operated. Here the air smelled of starched linen and simmering sauces. Waitstaff moved with swift, silent efficiency, their black and white uniforms a stark contrast to the couture inside. Clara Evans adjusted the strap on her sensible black shoes, her feet already aching. A single mother of one, she had picked up this extra catering gig for the weekend. The pay was excellent, and the tips from an event like this could cover her daughter's specialist co-pays for the next 3 months. It was a world away from her small 2-bedroom apartment, a world she observed with a detached curiosity. "Mummy, look," a small voice whispered at her side. Clara looked down at her 7-year-old daughter Lily. It was against every rule to have her here, but her regular babysitter had cancelled with a sudden flu, and Clara had been left with an impossible choice: lose the much-needed job, or bring Lily. She had tucked her into a small, unused staff break room with a colouring book and a tablet, praying her supervisor wouldn't find out. But Lily, drawn by the music, had slipped out. Her daughter's eyes, wide and full of wonder, were glued to the ballroom entrance. She was mesmerized by the women in their princess dresses, twirling under the lights. Lily loved to dance more than anything. It was a pure, uninhibited joy that always made Clara's heart ache with a mixture of love and fear. The doctors had been clear about Lily's condition, a congenital heart defect. No strenuous activity. No getting overly excited. Dance class was out of the question, so they danced in their living room, soft, gentle movements to quiet music, Lily's hand in hers. "It's beautiful, isn't it, sweet pea?" Clara whispered, trying to guide her back towards the break room. "But you can't be out here. It's for the guests." "But they're dancing." Lily breathed her small hand, clutching the worn, stuffed bunny she took everywhere. "Why isn't that man dancing? He looks sad." Clara followed her daughter's gaze and saw him for the first time, Alexander Blackwood. She knew who he was, of course. His face was occasionally in the business journals she skimmed at the library. The tragic story of his wife's death was city lore. Seeing him in person, she understood what the articles couldn't convey. He wasn't just powerful. He was wounded. The sadness Lily saw was a palpable force, a gravity that seemed to bend the light around him. "Some people just don't like to dance, baby," Clara said softly. Before she could react, Lily slipped from her grasp. It happened in a flash. One moment she was by her side, the next. She was a small, determined figure, marching through an opening in the crowd, heading directly for the shadowed alcove. Clara's blood ran cold. "Lily, no," she hissed, but it was too late. The little girl in a simple cotton dress, clutching a threadbare bunny, walked straight past women in Dior and Cartier, her eyes fixed on the billionaire. She stopped right in front of him, oblivious to the sudden lull in conversation, the turning of heads, the collective gasp that seemed to suck the air from the room. Lily looked up at the formidable man, her expression one of pure, childish sincerity. She held out her free hand. "Sir," she said, her small voice cutting through the silence. "My mummy says some people don't like to dance, but I think maybe you're just sad. Will you dance with me? I'm a very good dancer." The world seemed to stop. Every eye in the St. Regis Ballroom was on Alexander Blackwood, the man who never danced, and the little girl who had just broken every rule of his carefully constructed world. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was a thick, heavy blanket woven from shock disbelief and a delicious thread of scandalized curiosity. The string quartet faltered, a violin screeching into the quiet, before a panicked conductor waved them to a stop. Victoria Davenport, who had been holding court near the dance floor, froze with a champagne flute halfway to her lips, her eyes narrowing into venomous slits. Alexander Blackwood stared down at the small child before him. For the first time in 5 years, the ghost of Eleanor receded, replaced by the startling reality of a little girl in a simple blue dress. Her eyes were earnest, her grip on the stuffed rabbit fierce, and her outstretched hand was an unwavering, innocent demand. His first instinct was a cold, reflexive refusal, a curt dismissal that would send her scurrying away and restore the sterile order of his evening. His security detail, stationed discreetly near the walls, was already tensing, ready to intervene at the slightest nod. But then he really looked at her. He saw the untamed curl of her brown hair, so much like Clara's, though he hadn't noticed the mother yet. He saw the unblinking sincerity in her gaze, a quality so absent in his world of calculated smiles and hidden agendas. She hadn't asked for money or a photo or a favor. She had seen his sadness, the one thing he tried so desperately to conceal, and offered the only cure she knew: a dance. A memory sharp and piercing broke through the fog of his grief. Eleanor, years ago, at this very gala. A little boy, the son of a nervous new board member, had been hiding under a table crying. Eleanor had crouched down her couture gown, pooling on the floor, and whispered to him. A moment later, she had led him by the hand to the dance floor for a clumsy, giggling waltz, his tear-streaked face beaming. "See, Alex," she had said to him later, "a little bit of kindness costs nothing, and a dance can fix almost anything." The ice around Alexander's heart didn't melt, but a single hairline crack appeared. He ignored the stares, the whispers, the palpable tension. He slowly knelt, bringing himself down to Lily's level. The movement was stiff, unused to such gestures. "You're a very good dancer, are you?" he asked, his voice softer than anyone in the room had heard it in years. Lily nodded vigorously, her pigtails bouncing. "Yes, but my heart is a little broken, so I have to be gentle. The doctor says." She patted her chest matter-of-factly. The words hit Alexander with the force of a physical blow. "My heart is a little broken." He felt an uncanny echo of his own soul in her childish pronouncement. He looked past her and saw for the first time the woman hovering at the edge of the crowd. Her face was pale with panic, her eyes wide with apology and fear. She was clearly the mother. She was beautiful, but it was a quiet, harried beauty, completely out of place among the polished perfection of the other women. He saw the strain in her expression, the protective terror of a mother whose child had just walked into the lion's den. He made a decision. It was impulsive, illogical, and went against every defense mechanism he had built. "Well," Alexander said, his voice now a low murmur just for Lily, "my heart is a little broken too. I think a gentle dance is exactly what we both need." He took her small, offered hand. His large, powerful one, which signed billion-dollar deals and dismissed executives, was suddenly holding something fragile and infinitely more precious. He stood up and led the little girl onto the vast, empty expanse of the dance floor. A collective, audible gasp went through the room. Alexander shot a look at the conductor, a look of pure, unadulterated command. The man flinched and immediately raised his baton. A soft, slow melody filled the air, a gentle waltz. Alexander didn't know what to do. He couldn't twirl her or lead her in any traditional sense. so he simply held her small hand and her other on the back of her little shoulder, and they swayed. They walked in a slow, careful circle, a somber billionaire and a little girl in a cotton dress. Lily rested her head against his leg. For a moment, her stuffed bunny squished between them. For those 3 minutes, the world fell away. There were no gawking socialites, no furious Victoria, no ghosts of the past. There was only the simple physical act of moving to music with a child who had seen past his fortune and his fame and had simply seen a sad man. It was the most profound human connection he had felt in half a decade. When the music ended, he walked her back to the edge of the floor where her mother was waiting, looking as if she wanted the ground to swallow her whole. "I am so sorry, Mr. Blackwood," Clara stammered, her hands fluttering nervously. She slipped away. "I can't apologize enough. We'll leave immediately." She grabbed Lily's hand, ready to flee. "Wait," Alexander said. The word was an order, but the tone was not. He looked at Clara, truly seeing her now. He saw the exhaustion around her eyes, the fierce pride in her posture, the way her hand trembled as it held her daughter's. She wasn't fawning or intimidated. She was terrified, but for her child, not of him. "There's no need to apologize," he said, his gaze shifting from Clara to Lily and back again. "Your daughter was brave." He crouched down to Lily again. "Thank you for the dance. It was the best one I've had in a very long time." Lily beamed a radiant smile that lit up her face. "You're welcome. You look less sad now." Clara pulled her daughter closer, a flush of embarrassment and relief washing over her. "We really should go." "I'm Alexander," he said, extending his hand to Clara, ignoring her attempt to leave. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before taking it. Her hand was warm, her grip surprisingly firm. "Clara Evans, and this is Lily." "Clara Evans," he repeated the name, feeling unfamiliar and yet significant on his tongue. He noticed Victoria Davenport approaching her face, a mask of controlled fury. He knew what was coming, a public scene, a thinly veiled insult directed at Clara, an attempt to reclaim her position at his side. He would not allow it. "I trust my foundation is taking good care of the catering staff for the evening," he asked, his voice loud enough for the approaching Victoria to hear. It was a subtle power play, establishing Clara as being under his notice and therefore his protection. "Yes, of course, sir." "Very well," Clara replied, confused by the sudden turn of events. "Good," he said. He then turned his full attention back to Clara, effectively creating a wall between them and the rest of the room. Lily mentioned her heart. The Blackwood Foundation is the primary benefactor for the new pediatric cardiac wing at St. Jude's Hospital. Dr. Isabel Reed there is the best in the country. Clara's eyes widened. She knew of Dr. Reed. The waiting list to see her was years long, the cost astronomical. It was a distant, impossible dream. I know," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I will have my assistant contact you tomorrow," Alexander stated, not asked. "To arrange a consultation. No waiting list. The foundation will cover all expenses." Clara was speechless. Her mind reeled. This was life-changing. It was everything she had ever prayed for, handed to her by a man she'd met 30 seconds ago, all because her daughter had asked for a dance. Pride warred with desperation inside her. She didn't want charity. But for Lily, she would swallow her pride 1,000 times. I I don't know what to say, she managed. Say you'll accept, he said, his gaze intense. That's all. Before she could answer, his personal assistant, a slick young man named Miles, appeared at his elbow. Mr. Blackwood, the mayor is waiting to speak with you. Alexander gave a final nod to Clara, a look that said this isn't over, and allowed himself to be led away. As Clara stood there, stunned and holding her daughter's hand, she felt a cold presence beside her. Quite the little actress you have there, Victoria Davenport, sneered, her voice a low, vicious hiss. Teaching her to prey on a grieving man's weakness. It's pathetic even for someone like you. Take my advice. Take the money for the doctor and disappear. You are out of your league. Alexander Blackwood is not for you, and I will personally destroy anyone who gets in my way. The threat hung in the air, chilling Clara to the bone. She had just been given the greatest hope for her daughter's life, and in the same breath, a declaration of war. The days following the gala were a surreal blur for Clara. On Monday morning, as promised, a woman with a crisp, professional voice called from the Blackwood Foundation. By noon, an appointment was scheduled with the renowned Dr. Reed for the following week. It was a miracle delivered via telephone, an act of generosity so immense it felt more like a dream than reality. Clara walked around her small apartment in a daze, alternating between euphoric hope for Lily and a gnawing unease about the man who had made it possible. Alexander Blackwood was a force of nature, a man who could reshape her entire world with a single command. The thought was both intoxicating and terrifying. Victoria Davenport's venomous words echoed in her mind. You are out of your league? Clara knew it was true. She was a waitress, a caterer. A woman whose biggest financial decision was whether to buy the name brand cereal or the store brand. He was a billionaire who lived in a different stratosphere. On Wednesday, a sleek black car, the kind that usually only appeared in movies, pulled up outside her modest apartment building. A chauffeur in a grey suit stepped out and approached her as she was returning from the grocery store, juggling 2 bags and Lily's hand. Ms. Evans, the driver asked, his voice polite and deferential. Mr. Blackwood sent me. He asked if you and your daughter would be available this afternoon. He has something for Lily. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. This was too much, too fast. We have plans, she lied, her mind scrambling. The chauffeur simply smiled, a calm, knowing expression on his face. He anticipated you might say that. He asked me to give you this. He handed her a thick, cream-colored envelope. Inside, a single card was embossed with the Blackwood corporate logo. The note in a strong masculine script read, Clara, please. It's not a command. It's a request. I have something for Lily I think she will love, and I would like to talk to you away from the prying eyes of the St. Regis. Just an hour. The please disarmed her. It was a crack in the armor of the powerful billionaire, a hint of the man underneath. And the mention of a gift for Lily was a temptation she couldn't resist. Against her better judgment, she found herself agreeing. The car whisked them away from the familiar, gritty streets of her neighborhood and into the manicured, tree-lined avenues of the city's wealthiest district. They didn't go to a sterile office or a grand mansion. Instead, the car pulled up to a private gated garden, a hidden jewel tucked between historic brownstones. It was the Eleanor Blackwood Memorial Garden, a public space funded by his foundation, but currently closed for private maintenance. Alexander was waiting for them by a serene koi pond. He was dressed not in a severe tuxedo, but in dark trousers and a simple grey cashmere sweater. Without the armor of his formal wear, He looked younger, more approachable, but the sadness in his eyes remained. "I'm glad you came," he said, his smile small but genuine. Lily, however, wasn't looking at him. Her eyes were fixed on a beautiful antique-style carousel, small and ornate, that sat silently in the center of the garden. It was painted with whimsical animals and delicate flowers. "Is that for me?" Lily whispered, awestruck. "I had it brought here for the afternoon." Alexander explained, his gaze softening as he looked at her. "I was told your heart is too delicate for a real carnival ride. This one is very slow, very gentle. I thought you might like to try it." Clara felt a lump form in her throat. It was the most thoughtful, extravagant, and utterly perfect gift imaginable. It showed he had listened not just to her words, but to the unspoken realities of their lives. For the next hour, Lily was in heaven. The chauffeur operated the carousel at a crawl, and Lily rode every single animal, her laughter light and joyous, filling the quiet garden. While she rode, Alexander and Clara sat on a stone bench by the pond. "You didn't have to do all this," Clara said, her voice quiet. "I wanted to," he replied, watching Lily. Seeing her happy, it feels good. It's been a long time since I've felt that. He turned to her, his expression serious. "I also wanted to apologize if I overstepped at the gala. Offering the medical help? I know you're a proud woman, Clara. I hope I didn't offend you." His perception surprised her. "You didn't. You gave me the one thing I couldn't give my daughter. How could I ever be offended by that? I'm just overwhelmed." "I understand," he said. He told her about Eleanor then. Not the whole story, but pieces of it. How she had loved this garden. How she believed art and beauty were not luxuries, but necessities for the human soul. He spoke of her with a profound, aching reverence that made Clara understand the depths of his solitude. In turn, Clara found herself opening up. She told him about her husband Mark, an architect with big dreams who had died in a sudden construction accident 3 years prior. She spoke of the struggle to make ends meet, the constant worry, and the fierce, all-consuming love she had for Lily, the one piece of Mark she had left. For a brief, magical afternoon, they weren't a billionaire and a waitress. They were just two people bonded by loss and a shared devotion to the ones they loved. A fragile connection began to form, delicate as a spider's web, but surprisingly strong. But webs are easily disturbed. Victoria Davenport was not a woman who sat idly by. After the gala, she had put her resources to work. She hired a ruthless private investigator, a man named Silas Croft, who specialized in digging up dirt for the city's elite. "Find out everything about her," Victoria had commanded. "Clara Evans. I want to know where she lives, where she works, who her friends are, what debts she has. I want to know every mistake she's ever made. I want ammunition." Croft was efficient. Within days, he had a full dossier. It detailed Clara's financial struggles, her late rent payments from the year before, and every catering job she'd ever taken. It was the portrait of a woman living on the edge. But there was no scandal, no criminal record, no sordid affairs. She was to Croft's professional disappointment clean. "That's not good enough," Victoria snapped when he delivered the report. "If there's no dirt, we'll make some." Her plan was viciously simple. She found a disgruntled former manager from a restaurant where Clara had worked 2 years ago, a man who had been fired for skimming from the register. Victoria offered him $10,000 in cash to tell a different story. A few days later, Victoria made her move. She ran into a close friend of Alexander's, a man named Julian Croft, a powerful investment banker, and a notorious gossip at a high-end restaurant. "Julian, darling," she began, her tone oozing with concern. "I'm so worried about Alexander." "What's wrong?" Julian asked, his interest piqued. "This waitress, this Clara Evans." Victoria sighed, shaking her head sadly. "I did a little digging, you know, just to be safe. It turns out she has a reputation. A friend of mine used to manage a restaurant she worked at. He said she was let go for getting inappropriately close to wealthy male patrons, using her child as bait to garner sympathy. It's a whole routine." The lie was slick, believable, and utterly devastating. She knew Julian would spread it through their social circle like wildfire. The whispers started subtly. At the country club on the golf course over cocktails. "Did you hear about Blackwood's new pet project? A manipulative waitress, using her sick kid, a classic gold digger." Meanwhile, Clara remained blissfully unaware. Her life was focused on Lily's upcoming appointment. Alexander had called a few more times, short conversations that felt like stolen moments of normalcy. He asked about Lily's day. She asked about his. The tentative bond between them grew stronger with each call. He was planning to accompany them to the hospital, a gesture that touched Clara deeply. The day before the appointment, Clara was working a lunch shift at a downtown bistro when Victoria Davenport walked in. She wasn't there to eat. She walked directly to Clara's station, her smile as cold as a morgue slab. "I warned you." Victoria said, her voice a low threat that only Clara could hear. The other waitstaff were busy, the patrons oblivious. "I don't know what you're talking about," Clara said, her hands trembling as she polished a wine glass. "Oh, I think you do." Victoria leaned in closer, her expensive perfume cloying and suffocating. "I told you to disappear. You didn't listen. Now things are going to get unpleasant. A story is circulating, you see, about a desperate little waitress and her well-rehearsed sob story. It's amazing what people will believe." Clara stared at her, horrified. "You would do that? You would lie about me, about my daughter. I would do much more than that to protect what is mine." Victoria's eyes were devoid of any warmth or humanity. "Alexander is a man who values loyalty and detests deception above all else. He was betrayed once by his business partner years ago, and he financially ruined the man. He has no tolerance for it. When he hears these stories, and he will, what do you think he will do? Do you think he'll believe you, the caterer he just met? Or will he believe his peers, his friends, the world he has known his entire life?" Victoria straightened up, admiring her nails. "This is your last chance. Cancel the appointment. Tell him you don't want his help. Cut all contact and crawl back to whatever hovel you came from. If you don't, I will escalate this. I will make sure that every door in this city is closed to you. You won't be able to get a job waiting tables at a greasy spoon. Think about your daughter Clara. Is your little flirtation with the billionaire worth her future?" She turned and walked out, leaving Clara standing there, the wine glass shaking so hard in her hand she was afraid it would shatter. The hope of the last week curdled into pure, unadulterated terror. Victoria wasn't just threatening her. She was threatening her ability to provide for Lily. She was threatening their very survival. The seed of doubt, once planted in the fertile ground of high society, grew with astonishing speed. Julian Croft, the investment banker, did exactly as Victoria had predicted. Over a game of squash with another of Alexander's associates, he relayed the story with feigned reluctance. "It's a shame. Alexander is so vulnerable right now. This woman sounds like a professional." From there, the rumor metastasized, twisting and gaining venom with each telling. Alexander was insulated from most gossip, living in the rarefied air of his executive suite and private residences. But some of it inevitably trickled through. His personal assistant Miles, a young man fiercely loyal, but also attuned to the social currents, first brought it to his attention. "Sir," Miles began hesitantly one afternoon, as Alexander was reviewing quarterly reports. "There are some rumors circulating regarding Ms. Evans." Alexander didn't look up from his papers. "I don't care about rumors, Miles. I understand, sir, but they are persistent, and they are coming from people within your circle. Mr. Croft, Mr. Vanderbilt. They are suggesting she is not what she appears, that she has a history of this sort of thing." Alexander's pen stopped moving. "A history of what sort of thing?" His voice was dangerously quiet. "Of taking advantage of wealthy men, sir, using her daughter's illness to elicit sympathy and financial support." Alexander finally looked up, his eyes like chips of ice. "And you're telling me this why?" Miles swallowed hard. "Because Victoria Davenport is making it her personal mission to ensure you hear it. She is framing it as concern for you." "Victoria." Alexander said the name, tasting like ash in his mouth. He knew her character. He knew her ambition. But the poison was insidious. He had built his empire on logic data and a keen, almost cynical understanding of human motivation. He had seen the lengths people would go to for money and power. He had been burned before, years ago, by a trusted partner who had embezzled millions, a betrayal that had hardened his heart long before Eleanor's death. Could he be that wrong about Clara? He replayed their conversations in his mind. Her pride, her initial reluctance to accept his help, the genuine love for her daughter. It all felt real. But was he a fool, a grieving man so desperate for a flicker of human connection that he was blind to a masterful deception? The thought was a cold spike of fear in his gut. Victoria, knowing the whispers alone might not be enough, prepared her final decisive strike. She paid her investigator Silas Croft another substantial sum. This time, the instructions were explicit: create proof. Croft was a master of his dark art. He followed Clara for 2 days. He watched her take Lily to the park. He watched her go to her waitressing job. It was all maddeningly wholesome. Then he got his opportunity. A male friend of Clara's, a fellow single parent from Lily's old playgroup named David, dropped by her apartment to return a book he had borrowed. They stood in the doorway for a few minutes, laughing about something one of their kids had said. David, seeing Clara looked tired, gave her a brief, friendly hug before leaving. Croft, positioned across the street with a long lens camera, captured the moment. He took a dozen shots. From the compressed perspective of the telephoto lens, the innocent hug looked intimate, secretive. He then went a step further. He used his contacts to pull David's financial records. The man was a struggling freelance graphic designer, constantly chasing invoices. Victoria now had her weapons. She requested a meeting with Alexander at his office under the guise of discussing a donation for the foundation. She arrived looking somber, the picture of a concerned friend. "Alexander, I hate to be the one to do this," she began, her voice filled with fake anguish. "I know you want to see the best in people. It's one of your most admirable qualities. But I can't stand by and watch you be taken for a fool." She slid a sleek leather-bound folder across his vast mahogany desk. "I had someone look into her for your own protection. I'm so sorry." Alexander opened it. The first thing he saw was the report from the disgruntled ex-manager, a signed affidavit full of lies about Clara's inappropriate behavior and manipulative tactics. It was hearsay, but it was damningly written. Then he saw the photographs. A series of grainy but clear shots of Clara in the doorway of her apartment embracing another man. The angle made it look like a clandestine lover's tryst. The final page was a summary of David's precarious financial situation, followed by a cruel, speculative paragraph penned by Victoria herself. It is believed Evans and her accomplice David Miller work together. She gains the sympathy and entry, and they share the financial rewards. A classic sympathy grift operation. The air left Alexander's lungs. The images, the affidavit, the cold clinical summary, it all played directly into his deepest fears and his oldest wounds. The betrayal by his former partner felt fresh again. The wall around his heart, which had just begun to show cracks, instantly rebuilt itself thicker and more impenetrable than before. He felt a surge of cold, white-hot fury. At Clara for her perceived deception, at Victoria for being right, but mostly at himself for his own pathetic weakness. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Victoria," he said, his voice completely devoid of emotion. "You may go now." Victoria, seeing the look on his face, knew she had won. She gave a sympathetic nod and left a triumphant smirk gracing her lips once the office door closed behind her. The phone call to Clara came an hour later. It was not Alexander, but his assistant, Miles. The warmth was gone from his voice, replaced by a cold corporate efficiency. "Ms. Evans, I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Blackwood. He has asked me to inform you that he will not be able to accompany you to the hospital appointment tomorrow." Clara's stomach dropped. "Oh, is everything all right? Furthermore," Miles continued, ignoring her question, "while the Foundation's commitment to Dr. Reed's initial consultation will be honored, any further financial assistance for treatment will need to be re-evaluated through the standard application channels. There are no guarantees of approval." The message was brutally clear. The miracle was being rescinded. The drawbridge was being pulled up. He was cutting them off. Did he say why?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. "Mr. Blackwood is a very busy man, Ms. Evans. He has a foundation to run that helps thousands of children. He cannot allow himself to be distracted. Goodbye." The line went dead. Clara stood in her kitchen, the phone still pressed to her ear, tears streaming down her face. It was worse than she could have ever imagined. Victoria hadn't just made good on her threat. She had completely and utterly succeeded. Alexander believed her. He believed she was a fraud, a liar, a user. The brief, beautiful connection they had shared was a lie in his eyes. The humiliation was a physical pain, sharp and suffocating. She sank into a chair, her body racked with sobs. She had let herself hope. She had let herself believe that someone from that glittering foreign world could see her for who she was. She had been a fool. Her pride, which she had swallowed for Lily, now returned with a vengeance. She would not accept a single cent more from him. She would not take her daughter to an appointment paid for by a man who thought she was a monster. She would find another way. She always had. With shaking hands, she picked up the phone and cancelled the appointment with Dr. Reed's office. Then she deleted Alexander Blackwood's number from her phone. She would protect her daughter, and she would protect her own shattered heart. She would disappear from his life so completely, it would be as if they had never met. The days that followed were a return to a bleak, cold reality for Alexander. He threw himself into his work with a renewed, almost manic ferocity. He was merciless in meetings, demanding and unyielding. He attended functions with Victoria Davenport on his arm, presenting a united, powerful front to the world. He played the part she had written for him, the shrewd billionaire who had wisely extricated himself from a distasteful situation. But beneath the icy facade, he was in turmoil. The folder Victoria had given him sat in the bottom drawer of his desk like a venomous snake. Every time he thought of it, he felt a surge of rage. But the anger was a hollow thing. It couldn't drown out the memory of Lily's laughter on the carousel, or the look in Clara's eyes when she spoke of her late husband. His logical mind accepted the evidence. The world was full of grifters. It was the most likely explanation. But his heart, the broken, dormant thing he thought had died with, Eleanor protested. It felt wrong. The Clara he had spoken with in the garden, the woman who had shared her grief with him, simply did not reconcile with the conniving predator in Victoria's report. One evening, about a week after he'd cut contact, he was in his study at home. A cavernous room lined with books he no longer read. He poured himself a whiskey, the amber liquid doing nothing to warm the chill inside him. His assistant Miles had informed him that Clara had cancelled the appointment with Dr. Reed. The news had hit him harder than he expected. If she were a true gold digger, wouldn't she have taken the one thing she could get, the free consultation? Her refusal was a quiet act of defiance that didn't fit the narrative. Haunted by this inconsistency, Alexander did something he rarely did. He decided to bypass the polished, curated information he was usually fed. He picked up his phone and called his head of security, a discreet and ruthlessly efficient man named Robert Davies. Davies was an ex-MI6 agent, a man who dealt in facts, not rumors. "Davies," Alexander said, his voice low, "I have a private matter for you. I want you to look into a woman named Clara Evans, and I want the unvarnished truth, no third-party investigators, no social gossip. You personally. I want to know everything. Financials, employment history, personal associations. And I want you to investigate the evidence given to me by Victoria Davenport. The affidavit from the ex-manager, the photos. I want to know if they're real." "Understood, Mr. Blackwood." Davies replied, his tone unchanging. He never asked why. He just delivered results. Davies went to work with a quiet precision that was terrifying to behold. He didn't rely on cheap PIs like Silas Croft. He used sophisticated digital forensics background checks and discreet in-person inquiries. The first domino to fall was the affidavit. Davies discovered that the ex-manager, a man named George Peterson, had been fired for embezzlement. A quick check of his recent bank activity showed a $10,000 cash deposit the day after he had signed the statement for Victoria. It was a clear payoff. Next, the photographs. Davies's team analyzed the high-resolution originals, which he obtained through less-than-legal digital means from Silas Croft's server. They analyzed the lighting, the shadows, the metadata. But the real breakthrough came from simple surveillance. Davies identified the man in the photo, David Miller, and followed him. He observed him picking up his own 7-year-old son from school. A few inquiries at the school revealed that David Miller and Clara Evans were part of a small circle of single parents who had supported each other since their children were toddlers. They were friends, nothing more. The hug was meaningless. The entire case Victoria had built was a house of cards, a spiteful, calculated fabrication. When Davies presented his findings to Alexander in a new factual folder, Alexander felt a wave of self-loathing, so intense it almost buckled his knees. He had let his cynicism, his old wounds, and the venom of a jealous woman cloud his judgment. He had hurt Clara. He had taken away her hope for her daughter based on a complete and utter lie. The guilt was crushing. But as he sat there staring at the report, Davies cleared his throat. "Sir, there is something else," he said. "It's likely nothing, but in the interest of being thorough, I ran a deep background check on her late husband, Mark Evans." "And?" Alexander asked, his voice raw. "He was an architect, as Ms. Evans told you. Died in a workplace accident 3 years ago. But before that, when he was a student at Columbia University, he was the recipient of a scholarship." Alexander waved a dismissive hand. "That's hardly relevant, Davies." "Ordinarily not, sir." Davies continued unfazed. "But I thought the name of the scholarship might be of interest to you. It was the Eleanor Blackwood Memorial Scholarship for the Arts and Architecture." The world stopped. Alexander stared at Davies, his mind struggling to process the words. The scholarship. Eleanor had set up the endowment in her will. It was managed by the university, designed to help one promising but financially struggling student each year. He had signed the initial paperwork 5 years ago in a grief-stricken haze and had never thought of it again. "Are you certain?" Alexander whispered. "Positive, sir." Davies slid another paper across the desk. It was a copy of the acceptance file from the university archives. There was Mark Evans' photo, a young man with a wide, optimistic smile. And attached to it was the personal essay he had written as part of his application. Alexander picked it up, his hands trembling. He began to read. Mark wrote about his passion for designing community spaces, for creating buildings that brought people together. He wrote about his financial struggles, working 2 jobs to support himself and his new wife while he studied. And then he came to the final paragraph. "I know this scholarship is in memory of your founder, Eleanor Blackwood. I never had the honor of meeting her, but her vision for a more beautiful, more connected world through art is an inspiration. If I am granted this incredible opportunity, I promise I will not waste it. I will work my entire life to build things that honor her legacy. This scholarship will not just change my life, it will change the life of my wife, Clara. She works tirelessly, so I can pursue this dream. This is for her as much as it is for me. Together we want to build a life as full of love and creativity as the one Mrs. Blackwood must have lived." Alexander had to put the letter down. He couldn't see the words through the blur of his tears. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a random meeting. It was a connection, a profound, invisible thread stretching back 5 years, woven by the woman he had lost. Eleanor, through her final act of generosity, had touched the life of Clara's husband. She had helped the man Clara loved. And now, years later, destiny, fate, or some other force he couldn't name, had brought Clara and her daughter to him. His feelings for Clara weren't a betrayal of Eleanor's memory. They were a continuation of it. The kindness he had shown Lily, the connection he felt with Clara, it was all part of Eleanor's legacy of love reaching out from beyond the grave. He stood up, a fire in his eyes that had been extinguished for 5 long years. He knew what he had to do. He had to find Clara. He had to beg for her forgiveness. And he had to tell her the incredible story of how their lives had been entwined long before they ever met. The silence from Clara's end was absolute. Her phone number was disconnected. When Alexander, driven by a desperate urgency, went to her apartment building, the superintendent informed him she and her daughter had moved out days ago, leaving no forwarding address. The news struck him with the force of a physical blow. He had not just hurt her. He had driven her from her home. Refusing to accept defeat, he tasked his ruthlessly efficient security chief, Robert Davies, with a single non-negotiable directive: find her, discreetly. Within a day, Davies located her. She was working double shifts at a highway diner 1 town over, a place of cracked vinyl booths and the constant smell of coffee. Alexander drove there himself, leaving his corporate armor behind. He saw her through the window, looking weary but resolute. When he walked in, the bell above the door, jingling her face, went pale with shock and a flicker of fear. He slid into a booth, his expression stripped of all arrogance. "Clara, please," he said, his voice urgent and low. "Just 5 minutes. Don't run." She approached his table, her posture rigid with hurt and pride. "You can't be here, Mr. Blackwood." "I know what Victoria did," he said, cutting straight to the heart of it. "I know she fabricated everything, the manager, the photos. It was a vicious lie, and I was a cynical fool to believe it. There is no excuse for my behavior, and I am so deeply sorry for the pain I caused you." His raw sincerity chipped away at her defenses, but the wound was still fresh. "You believed her." She stated the simple fact, a powerful condemnation. "I did." He admitted the shame evident in his voice. "And I will regret it forever. But there's more to this story. Something you need to see." He slid a folded paper across the table. It was the copy of her late husband's scholarship application. Confused, Clara unfolded it. Her eyes scanned the page, widening when she saw Mark's name. She read his passionate words about architecture, and then she reached the final paragraph. A choked sob escaped her as she read the lines about his wife Clara and his desire to honor the legacy of Eleanor Blackwood. Tears she had held back for so long now fell freely. "My Mark, your wife," she whispered, looking up at him through the blur. "Eleanor brought you into my life 5 years ago, Clara. We just didn't know it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Our meeting wasn't an accident. It was a circle closing. My feelings for you, my desire to help Lily. It isn't a betrayal of her memory. It's the last, most beautiful gift she ever gave me." In that moment, in the middle of a noisy diner, the anger and humiliation that had haunted Clara washed away, replaced by a profound sense of wonder. The universe, which had seemed so cruel, suddenly held a hidden, beautiful logic. From that night on, everything changed. Alexander didn't try to buy her forgiveness. He earned it. He was a quiet, steady presence, helping with homework, sharing simple meals, and becoming a friend. Lily's surgery was rescheduled, and this time Alexander was by Clara's side. The operation was a resounding success, funded not as charity, but as what he called Eleanor's investment coming to fruition. As for Victoria Davenport, her punishment was silent and absolute. Alexander simply cut her out of his life, and her social world built on his proximity crumbled into dust. 3 months later, at a private gala celebrating the new pediatric cardiac wing, Lily stood as the vibrant guest of honor. When the orchestra began a soft waltz, Alexander turned to Clara. A genuine smile, the first she had ever truly seen, lit up his eyes. "Clara Evans," he said warmly, "may I have this dance?" She smiled back, her own eyes shining. "I thought you didn't dance." "I didn't," he corrected, taking her hand and leading her to the floor. "But I found a new reason to start." As they moved together in perfect harmony, they were a man who had learned to live again, and a woman who had taught him how their new beginning, a testament to a love that had found a way to echo through time. And so a dance floor that was once a memorial to a love that was lost became the birthplace of a new one. Alexander and Clara's story reminds us that the deepest connections are often hidden in the fabric of our past, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. It shows that a heart, no matter how broken or guarded, can learn to beat again when touched by genuine kindness. Their journey from a grand ballroom to a humble diner and back again proves that wealth and status are no match for the power of truth, forgiveness, and a love that was simply meant to be. If this story of unexpected love and incredible twists touched your heart, please let us know by hitting the like button. Share it with someone who loves a story about second chances. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Click that notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thank you for listening.